Good hello everyone, thanks for watching another Sunday case study. This week we're looking at the British Labour leader politician Keir Starmer. I have chosen a very flattering image of Keir Starmer here. He's likely going to be the next British Prime Minister. I have already read the palms of Rishi Sunak, the current British Prime Minister. Have a look at that, I'll drop that in the description. But what I want to find out today is whether or not Keir Starmer's palms can tell us what sort of a man he is, and whether or not he will become the Prime Minister if we can see this in his hands. Now, so Keir Starmer is famous for being the Director of Public Prosecutions and was involved in the Jimmy Savile case. And, still a lot of controversy around this man, around the fact that Jimmy Savile was not found guilty. And both Keir Starmer and Jimmy Savile were knighted. So a lot of people draw, connections between those kind of obvious dots here. Now, what can his palms tell us? Is this an honest man? What are his intentions? What drives this man? Is he a good person? Would he make a good leader? Keir Starmer is currently 61, and it's useful to get an age when reading a palm because we can look at where a person is on the lifeline and try and provide some context around their current age. So that'll be useful in today's reading. But straight off the bat, I can see that Keir Starmer is an earth hand. So earth hands are, of course, square palms and short fingers. This is the length of his palm, and you can see that his fingers are short. Now, earth hands are typically, they're conservative, they're practical, they're stubborn. They don't deal with change very well. They are loyal. They love doing a job well done. They won't do a job unless it's well done. They often live for work. They're often very materialistic. Bill Gates has an earth hand. And initially looking at Keir Starmer's palms, I thought, well, this is very similar to Bill Gates. I've changed my mind a little bit since. I've not read the palms of Bill Gates, but I have made a video on billionaire signs in palmistry, and Bill Gates' palm is used as an example, so feel free to check that out. Earth hands are quite often very emotionally reserved, and a lot of barriers are up there. They're not great communicators, articulators of their emotions. They are the most likely of all of the element types to become military men or women, service personnel. And that's partly because of the rigid sense of order, routine. They thrive off these ways of living. Trust and dependability are certainly traits that earth hands can get along with, can get by with. And if you're dishonest to an earth hand, well, they will likely not speak to you again. I mean, the truest earth hands, and this is a very earthy earth hand. And it's no surprise that Keir Starmer became a defence lawyer specialising in human rights. And we can see here a very strong loyalty line. And what's really nice here is that we see the strength and the depth of this loyalty towards his work. His loyalties certainly lie closer to home than his environment, than his outside of his close-knit relationships. This upper line here is known as the via mater, the mother line, and I believe he has or had an incredibly strong relationship with his mother. I don't know if his mother is still with us. Being that Apollo is so long as well, it's likely that he inherited more from his mother than his father as well. The larger gap seen between Jupiter and Saturn suggests here as well that he had a stronger relationship with his mother. The stiff thumb here, it really shows, it's not incredibly long. It shows someone who's able to work very efficiently. This is someone who is even more stubborn than the earthy kind of hand shows us. This is someone who, once he gets an idea into his head, there's no stopping him. Thankfully, the flexed thumb here does provide some flexibility, but also a slight sort of weakness in that will. It provides a little bit of indecision. And one of the key things I picked up on straight away looking at Keir Starmer's palms were these three traits that can cause this kind of bad gambling type of personality, and that is the overall roundedness to the fingers. I mean, Apollo is a little bit sort of spatulate, which is a good thing. Got some balance there. But overall, the fingers are rounded. Apollo is much longer than Jupiter, And also we see here the lifeline is disconnected from the headline. Now, it's not necessarily a good or bad thing on its own. It certainly means an independent thinker, which is certainly a good thing in certain respects. But it means that the decisions are not connected to the life's energies. It means someone who's potentially impatient, who is willing to act before thinking. And this might lend well to this, this sort of indecision. The headline also doubles towards the end as well, and this is going to provide a bit more indecision. So unfortunately, this is not someone who is going to make the best of calls in the moment. These three signs, the rounded fingertips, the long Apollo, and the disconnect between the life and the headline, are the three signs of a bad gambler in palmistry. Now, that's not to say that Keir Starmer gambles, in the classic traditional sense of going to casinos. However, when you're making decisions on behalf of lots of people, it's extremely important that you're fact-based, cautious, listening to people around you, and not jumping before thinking. Now, this sign here, where you've got this disconnect between the life and the headline, I have to say this is very rare to see in an earth hand. It's far more likely you'll see this in a water hand, a long palm and long fingers. And this is partly because the longer the palm and the fingers, the more stretched out the lines become, the more abstract a way of thinking a person has, because their mental plane is enhanced, it's expanded. In an earth hand, things become a lot more black and white. Generally, earth hands are a lot more fact-driven, process-driven as a rule of thumb. So Keir Starmer is very unusual in this way. So the hope is here that he listens to people around him, and the people around him are good. Now, initially, when looking at Keir Starmer's palms, I thought, well, this isn't good. We've got a heart line here that doesn't reach up very far, and it's sort of straight, but then I thought, well, this is not a very good image. But on closer inspection, the heart line does thankfully rise up in between Saturn and Jupiter. It's very straight for a period of time, and then there's this sort of an emotional breakthrough and an ability, thankfully, for this person to open up this emotional capacity here in terms of judgment. This is someone who genuinely wants the best for those around him. I believe there was likely a point in his life where he had an emotional kind of epiphany. The one thing that I don't quite like what I see about his palms here is the fact that his second phalanx of Jupiter is not quite long enough for someone who is likely going to be a leader of a lot of people. This second phalanx of Jupiter, it governs our ability to make executive decisions. When it is the shortest of the two, it doesn't bode well for the capacity for this. The third phalanx of Jupiter is a little bit on the chubby side. It's stout. You can see the sort of widening here. Despite this, there's still a gap here. The short Jupiter finger, the widening of the basal phalanx of Jupiter, these are signs of an inferiority complex compensated for by drinking or sex, drugs, some sort of physical vice that creates a compensation around this sort of the feeling of inadequacy. In this case, it's likely that Keir Starmer likes a drink. I say that because had he had a straight heart line that sort of stopped underneath Saturn in the same way that Bill Gates has, he would likely have a problem with sexual expression, which would then seep out into sort of other avenues, compensating for thrill-seeking in gaining of materials. Luckily, we don't see that. As I say, this person is well balanced emotionally and wants what's best for others. The widening between the head and the heart line here thankfully kind of negates these possible negatives. That's not to say that this isn't someone who's very materialistically sort of conscious, because he is. All earth hands generally are. The heart line, generally, speaking, it does run alongside the headline. It's very low down for much of its course until this. And so there's a large aspect about Keir Starmer that is ruled emotionally ruled by his head. The marriage line here seen coming in on the side of the palm, even though we don't have the clearest of images, we can clearly see this person has an excellent marriage and is obviously devoted to his wife. The little finger, as we can see in this image here, is actually, it's long, it's not crooked, thankfully. It leans in ever so slightly, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not crooked as such. It does lend well to diplomacy skills. His ability to verbally articulate is very strong. With Mercury being long, with the headline being this kind of arc here is a wonderful sign, and the fact that it doubles slightly at the end as well, it really shows an ability to see things from more than one perspective. Certainly, it's not quite a writer's fork, and this again, this is partly what provides that indecision, which is partly what can sometimes make him sit on the fence. But it's extremely important to be able to see from all sides and not just his own point of view. So that's good. The Apollo finger being a little bit spatulate here, being that we've got a nice curve to the headline. Thankfully, it's not just all straight, plain sailing, black and white thinking. It means there's a bit of creativity. There's certainly a radical way of doing things. As I say, this is someone who's going to perhaps at some times jump before thinking, but there's also a non-conformist approach here. This is certainly someone who listens to his wife, and I actually think he'll listen to his wife more than his advisors when he does become Prime Minister, which is what I believe will happen. And the reasons why I say this, I don't think you need to really read palms if you know anything about British politics and where it's going at the moment to come to that conclusion. But the reason why I say that is because looking at his palms here, we have a triangle, and it's actually held upright by a central pillar. Now, this points towards a few things. Firstly, there is even something around what Keir is doing in some sort of creative field. The headline, the arc of the headline, this gentle kind of curve, shows a creative thinker. The spatulate Apollo shows someone who is really reaps a kind of job satisfaction from a tangible physical result, viewing a physical result from the efforts of their hard work. And also, the triangle formed from the heart line is a sign of mastering some sort of creative art, but it's also success derived from the support of a partner. I believe Keir's wife is highly supportive of his work, and in fact likely has a lot of input into a lot of the decisions that he makes, and the forming the bedrock of a lot of his ideas. Support here is definitely seen, and this support is grounding and providing the roots of his success. The doubling of the headline towards the end of the headline, this is who Keir Starmer is to his wife, his family, his friends, his what is within his domestic sphere. This is who Keir Starmer presents himself only to those he is closest to, and it'll be a very select few, being an earth hand. Generally speaking, earth hands are not particularly trusting, but once they do trust, once they do let a person in, they let them in for life. Which is why, also you scorn an earth hand and you will be scorned for life. Keir certainly has a great amount of motivation, drive. There's actually quite a lot of aggression seen here as well, and that's probably not a good sign, given that the head and the lifeline are disconnected. In some ways, there could be a bit of a temper here. The fingernails will show more about the temperament, as well as the thumb, the shape of the thumb. I can't get a good view of that. But overall, this is certainly someone who's ruled more by logic than a boisterous sort of personality and willpower. Yes, he's stubborn, but there's a great deal of logic here to balance out any kind of temper. And you can see the drive here, this coursing ambition line almost. It's not an ambition line, but there's a drive and support that comes close from the home, the domestic sphere, that's supporting, that's providing motivation and energy, action to say this is what you will do. It's pointing towards Mercury and Apollo, this place of how we present ourselves to the outside world, and shortly after that we see this effort line, an ambition line that drives towards judgment, decision making, authority, ego. So we see here this are the markings of the beginnings of his career and what really propelled this person. The first steps are, towards academia, and then really, ambition. And this sort of triangle here that's formed on the lifeline is the overall, these two signs that come together to form the strengthening of this positive sign of prosperity. Essentially, it's fortune by hard work. And many people have this, in fact. You complete your GCSEs, and then you, in your mid-20s, after university, you think, right, this is what I'm going to do. And it kind of forms this two-step sort of triangle formation. Now, the fate line, although it's not the clearest of images, you can see it running through the center. It's sort of coming from in between the central plane of Mars and Luna. This shows someone who's working in a field of social work, a mixture of working with and for others. A career line stemming from Luna is always a career line that is in an industry that sort of waxes and wanes, often support from and by the opposite sex, and also it shows a career that is someone who desires a career in the limelight. A career that stems more from the central plane of Mars is a very sort of hierarchical role, a bureaucratic role. And so we see a career line that's sort of a mixture between the two here. As far as politicians go, this is a far more creative hand than I thought I was going to see, especially for an Earth hand. So this is quite nice. Now, one of the really interesting things I've seen here, and I believe this is what I'm seeing, is a Mercury line that stems from Luna and rises up onto past the heart line, past a bit of a wave in the heart line, which is not a good sign, right up onto Mercury. Now, this is known as a bow of intuition, or at least his Mercury line bows ever so slightly, and it provides a great deal of instinct, which lends well to this jumping in, the mark of the tiger, this disconnect between the head and the lifeline. Which is actually interesting because Jimmy Savile was about to, although already dead, get off lightly. He was about to, the investigation was going to be closed. Now, according to The Guardian, one person who worked with Starmer during the investigation said that it was about to be closed, and Starmer reported that it was nagging at him, and he asked his colleague Levitt to look into it just one more time, and this makes sense, seeing this bow of intuition. Now, had that not had happened, that last minute, jump in without thinking decision had been made, had it not been made, the changes, would never have been discovered, potentially. The changes to the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Services, would never have happened. The changes in which how investigations into sexual assaults are investigated would never have happened. And this was created to prevent, the further kind of mistreatment, miscarriages of justice towards victims of sexual assault. Now, the one thing that's nagging at me, and I've already mentioned this tiny little kink here seen on the heart line. Notice where the heart line is quite heavily depressed here. And there's a little bit of a wave. This can mean one of two things. Potentially dishonesty. I don't think that's what we see here. I think actually, other signs in the palm, the shape of the palm itself, as well as the loyalty line here, I'm not sure we actually see that. And you know what? I completely changed my opinion about Keir Starmer after reading his palm. I didn't think he was as honest as this. A kind of a wavy heart line, one a bit more like this, can certainly suggest sort of a deviancy, an emotionally sort of crippled individual, someone who is not doing things for the right reasons, not considerate, and deceitful and dishonest, potentially. But it also can be a coronary issue, a heart issue. The heart line shows us the emotional framework of an individual, but also the physical as well. And in this case, I believe that's what we're looking at. We're looking at potential heart issues. If I was going to advise Keir Starmer, I would say cut back on the drinking. This man, I believe, certainly enjoys a drink. I find it interesting that the Mercury, or sometimes known as the health line, where it runs through the heart line, this is where we see the sort of the change, the kink in the tracks, the bend in the road. And so it's sort of pointing towards his major health issue. Now, where Keir Starmer becomes Labour leader on his lifeline is at the age of around about 56, and that's about roughly 4 years ago. And you can see actually a change in the direction of his lifeline at that time. You can see a slight change in curvature if you look here at the lifeline. And also you see this sort of a desire to kind of pull away. If this were the left hand, it would be a desire to move. Potentially, I believe this is what I'm seeing here. It's sort of a disconnected secondary sort of branch here, a branch off the lifeline. And really, what this is I believe the sign here of the inevitable path towards number 10, and it begins at this sort of age where he becomes Labour leader at the age of 56, and this is where it is on the lifeline. On the sun line, it would be about here, 61ish, maybe a little bit below that. And you can really see here the sun line. I can appreciate it's not all that clear, but it does become much stronger later on. Notice the thickness of this line, and it's sort of made stronger by this sort of branching of the roots of supports from emotional stability. Again, his wife is highly supportive of his work, I have no doubt. And likely those around him, it's who you know after all. Unfortunately, I don't have the clarity here to see children in his palms, but where you can see children on the palms are the family ring, which there are two in palmistry. And you can see them both here and here, and they appear as islands on the family ring. An island kind of looks a bit like an eye, like this, a blockage of energy. And the reason why it's sort of our islands in palmistry are always negative, but in this case obviously it's a good thing. And the reason why they show up as these islands is because we're prevented from sleep. It prevents us, they're expensive, it's stressful, it's difficult having children, and so they kind of essentially interrupt the flow of energy within the family unit when we have them. But also children can appear off the marriage or attachment lines, the union lines, as sort of upwards and downwards strokes, sometimes both. Sometimes they run straight through. Some people also believe in palmistry that children appear as upward strokes around the basal kind of phalanx of the thumb, the mount of Venus. I don't believe this to be true. But a quick Google search, provides us with the information. Keir Starmer has 2 children. And what is interesting is we see here the kind of wave on the rosette here. Notice how we've got a kind of an impress here, and this is a sign of damage to the reproductive organs, and often it shows an inability to of the functionality of those reproductive organs. And so sometimes in palmistry we see some sort of contradicting information. The answer is quite clearly he's had a vasectomy. This is the right hand. It shows what's physical, what's external. And so Keir Starmer has had an operation. He can no longer have children. He's had 2 children. He doesn't need to worry about it anymore. So that's what's happened here. So overall, I am actually a bit more reassured. I feel this is an honest person. This is someone who can at times take a bit of a gamble, but thankfully he has good instincts, very good instincts, far more than the average. He's a highly creative individual. Not highly creative, but there's more creativity than your average politician, certainly. The main takeaway for me is that he is highly loyal to a cause. And generally speaking, he wants what's right for everyone around him. The overall width of his hands it's always a good sign in someone who is a potential lawyer, a judge, a police officer. The width of a hand, it expands the overall width, the central plane of Mars. Mars is where we fight battles. It's our dealings with other people. It shows us the width. A good width to a palm shows us our ability to handle difficult discussions and facilitate difficult social environments. The fact that Keir is not the best decision maker is negated by his keen instincts, and also the support around him, a highly supportive and likely loving wife. He certainly loves his wife. Don't be fooled by his calm, cool exterior. This is certainly a man with a great amount of drive, aggression, motivation. This is certainly a man who will rise to action when required. My main and only concern, really, there is the health concern here, is, it's good he's loyal, but who is he loyal to? Is he loyal? Is he only loyal to those within his domestic sphere, within friends of friends? As I say, it's who you know. You don't become a knight by just being a good person. Generally speaking, sure, he wants what's right for others, but will this loyalty to those he is closest to override this? I believe time will tell. I don't believe he's going to listen to his advisors all that much. I do think he'll listen to his wife, but that's probably about it. Maybe 1 or 2, close friends, close advisors. But otherwise, he's going to make his decisions himself. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this reading, and your thoughts on the potential, probably the next Prime Minister of Britain. So thank you for watching, and let me know who you'd like me to read for next week's palm reading. I may well do Bill Gates, actually. I did mention him in this one. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.